All right, let's move to what's going on with regard to Israel. Witkoff made some significant comments indicating that a deal could be imminent. You guys have done the best reporting. And by the way, I just want to give you kudos. Like, Dropsite is still like brand new in terms of the news media space and has become so essential and is beating all of the legacy news organizations on many topics, but especially with regard to Israel, simply because of your willingness to actually talk to the players involved. So kudos to you and Jeremy, because it really is incredible. And I know you guys also have found them to be utterly indispensable for understanding the reality of what is happening in these various negotiations. But in any case, Witkoff made some comments indicating we knew that there had been some understanding of an agreement between the U.S. and Hamas, but we also saw Israel come in and blow that up. And previously, Witkoff basically sort of running cover for Israel and being like, oh, yeah, Hamas, they're not agreeing, even though it was stolen complete bullshit. Now we're getting a bit of a different tone from Witkoff, so we'll take a listen to this and we'll get Ryan's reaction on the other side.
I think that we are on the precipice of sending out a new term sheet that hopefully will be delivered later on today. The president is going to review it. And I have some very good feelings about getting to a long-term resolution, temporary ceasefire, and a long-term resolution, a peaceful resolution of that conflict.
So, Ryan, what is your read on where we are? And I know Jeremy had some new reporting, and whether this latest, we may be heading to a ceasefire, is going to be different from the previous assertions that we may be nearing something.
Yeah, and thanks for the kind words on that. And Jeremy's reporting on this one in particular is really important because, to your point, what it did is it exposed that there had been this agreement reached between Hamas and Witkoff, so that when Israel came out and denounced the deal and Witkoff said, oh, yes, of course, Israel is correct and Hamas is being intransigent, the rest of the media, which does read Dropsite, is like, that's not what we're hearing. Like, we're hearing that actually Hamas is fine with this, and Israel's the one that is against it,
as per usual.
And because we laid out the exact terms and why Hamas had reached an understanding that this would be something acceptable to them, and so then Witkoff comes out the next day with the statement you just heard, and delivers roughly the same. So he said we're going to deliver this paper to both sides. He has. Jeremy, you can go check Jeremy's feed. Put this. I think we have one post from Jeremy up here which is the top of his thread from this morning. Posted this at 3 a.m. this morning. The ceasefire draft circulated by Witkoff includes many of the same points from the earlier draft I saw, but it would be 5 Israelis released on day 1, 5 on day 7. Bodies of 18 deceased returned. UN would resume aid delivery operations. Trump would personally guarantee the deal. The original deal that Hamas had agreed to, that Jeremy had reported on, was 5 Israelis released on day 1, and then 5 on day 60. So at the very end.
Gotcha.
Because the crux of the disagreement over the terms of a ceasefire is that Israel wants it worded so that they can resume the war whenever they feel like it.
Right.
Hamas wants it worded so that it will lead to a permanent truce.
Right.
And that Trump will guarantee that it will lead to a permanent truce, because they believe it doesn't matter what the words are, that Trump is the only human being on earth who has the power to stave off Israel from restarting the war.
They're correct about that.
They're right. And so the idea was, if there's 5 who are getting released on the 60th day, that at least you'd have to keep the 60 days going. And that in that 60 days, a truce would settle in and negotiations would move so that you would continue it beyond the 60 days. The new agreement, according to Jeremy, waters down the language about keeping it going beyond the 60 days. And of course, as you saw, does the 5 after just 7 days.
And so are there only 10 living hostages?
No, I think there's like 30 or something. So,
okay.
Though there's still reason for Israel to continue to negotiate even beyond this. But the big fear from Hamas is the one that just occurred to everybody watching this. Okay, so 5 on day 1, the other 5 on day 7. So you get a 7-day ceasefire.
Right.
And on day 8,
back to horror.
The bombing continues and the aid is cut off again. And so that's why they're asking Witkoff and Trump to personally say, like, you say you want this over. Just say it out loud and say that you're going to guarantee that this will continue.
Right.
And then if the U.S. betrays them on that, like it's at some point, the U.S. and Israel have the bombs, and nobody can really stop them from dropping them forever.
That's right.
So the question is, and Hamas has not decided and has not responded, according to Jeremy, yet. But I would suspect they're going to try to push that 7 days closer to the 60.
Gotcha. So the outline of what Jeremy's laying out there is what Israel is seeking in the deal?
No, this is what Witkoff sent.
What Witkoff sent?
Right. So Witkoff has
and
sent
neither
a new
side
version.
has said
Right.
okay to this yet.
Right, right. But Witkoff thinks from his conversations that he's going to be able to get, that there will be something close to this that they agree to.
And how hopeful are you?
I mean, it's wild because Israel is very publicly insisting that it will not honor any agreement and will continue the war.
Right. To
And
keep
so-
their their population. I mean, you can't even say like their right flank, just their entire population at this point. Yeah.
On the other hand, the international isolation that they're increasingly facing and the strategic dead end that they have found themselves in do create some pressure and logic toward a long-term truce.
Yeah.
Like the world is ready for this to be over, and doesn't have patience for more burning of children alive. Like for what?
Right.
Like if Hamas is also, as part of this, they would leave governance, like after as part of the permanent truce, and the Israeli forces would only have to withdraw to where they were on March 2nd, which is not even as strong as the January thing. So Israel's getting a lot in this, while saying they're not even going to honor it.
Right.
So I think that they will sign it eventually because of the pressure that they're under, and also by their own internal logic that they don't believe they have to honor deals, and that they will hope that that Trump will let them kind of restart the war.
Right.
And I don't know if he will or not.
Right.
What do you think?
I think it's very possible. I mean, I still think that they have the Trump plan is ultimately the goal, even if they, achieve some sort of a short-term ceasefire. That doesn't preclude the broader goal of, making conditions so unlivable and horrible that people, quote unquote, self-deport.
Right.
It seems to me like that really is the end goal, because otherwise, Bibi domestically has very little to show for all these, for years now of this horror.
And there was a report in Israel yesterday that it has cost them like tens of billions of dollars. I mean, the U.S. is paying for a lot of it, but not all of it.
Right. And and it's been difficult for their economy because they have, they need to keep calling up reserves, and certainly difficult for tourism as a significant part of the economy, and like who's really itching to travel to Israel right now outside of like Brianna Wu. And then you also have, like you said, they're sort of all in at this point because outside of the U.S., they really have lost support of the entire rest of the world. So they're at a place where they have to, pursue a very high risk and, very high risk strategy. I think for him too, personally, in terms of, it's been all about forestalling any sort of reckoning for his previous failures and how October 7th happened on his watch, et cetera. So I don't know. There's still, to me, a lot of uncertainty about how all this unfolds.
I think they also desperately do not want Western reporters or say European diplomats, something to go into Gaza.
Yeah, that's right. It's something that Piers Morgan, we're going to talk about him in a minute, has really picked up on and is really sort of drilling in on, which is interesting in and of itself. At the same time, we wanted to update on this aid situation. Ryan, why don't you set up, go ahead and put this image up on the screen, and why don't you set up what is happening here and also what the Israelis were claiming happened here?
Yeah, so this is footage from Abdul Rahman Ismail, a very extremely courageous reporter in Gaza, who says he barely escaped with his own life from this situation. This is a warehouse in Deir el-Bala, which is where Abu Bakr Abed is from, coincidentally.
Wow.
And it just got mobbed because the situation has become, completely dystopian and out of control. Right here, you're seeing shots fired. This was initially reported as Hamas, like by kind of pro-Israel side as like Hamas firing. That appears not to have been what happened.
Oh, shocking.
But you did have, I think, 4 people crushed by bags of flour and killed. Like
Jesus.
In this chaos.
Yeah, I mean, the level of desperation is unfathomable.
Yes, and what's amazing to me is if you think back on the last 20 months, that these are really the first scenes we've seen like this. Like, if Washington, D.C. was besieged and starved, like, we would descend into chaos by the afternoon.
I was living in New York during after Superstorm Sandy.
Or the power went out.
The power went out, like south of, I don't know, 40th Street or something like that. And 2 days in, people were talking about like potential societal total collapse.
And you could walk across the Brooklyn Bridge.
Right, and there's still like
leave.
plenty of food, and it was fine, like everyone was okay. But yeah, people were like, oh, if we get like 2 more days of this, there's just going to be rampant lawlessness in the streets.
Total anarchy and breakdown. Yeah. And yet, you didn't see that at all until Israel on March 2nd blocked all aid from coming in, and then barred the UNRWA or World Food Program from having anything to do with aid distribution, and brought in a bunch of mercenaries to basically deliberately create scenes of chaos,
right,
and bedlam, and that's the only way you got to scenes like that.
Yeah. Wow. Unbelievable. The aid distribution also, and this is, I think, also a real sign of where we are in the timeline. Put this up on the screen, has been uniformly condemned. I mean, it was crazy to me that the U.S. mercenary that they hired to like head up this thing resigned.
Yeah, too much for him.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that tells you a lot. Now, of course, they found some other ghouls to run this monstrosity. But that guy in particular was like, all right, I'm not being involved. I can't be involved with this. You have the UN condemning Israel's new aid program in Gaza after what the New York Times describes as a chaotic start.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll just add, Rasha Abu Jalal writing for Dropsite. You can put up C3B. I can link to this down in the comments or the show description. Just read her entire piece. She's based out of Gaza City, tremendous reporter. Just describing the way that this is, deliberately organized as part of the war effort.
Right.
And so when we talk about like incompetence or not working as intended, it is working. It's working as intended.
Right. It's chaotic in the New York Times words, and that is a feature.
Right.
That was intentional.
But I would highly recommend her piece.
At the same time, we have Israeli leaders continuing to just say out loud what their genocidal goals are. We can put Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's latest words up on the screen. He says, in part, this is a war of good against evil. Of course, he's been using this language since the very beginning, for those of us who have been paying attention. It's being fought against human animals, monsters, and we will defeat them. We will wipe them out. They will not remain. We can put Smotrich up on the screen next. Making some, similarly illustrative comments here. We're being blessed with the opportunity, thank God, of seeing the expansion of the borders of the land of Israel. So this is the greater Israel idea on all fronts. We are being blessed with the opportunity to blot out the seed of Amalek, a process which is intensifying. And this, again, was something that was said early on in the onslaught in Gaza, and everyone went back and read about what Amalek is. And Amalek says, kill the baby, the oxen, literally everyone. So overtly genocidal comments here, not that it's a surprise really coming from either one of them at this point. Right,
it's a nice window into the politics of the war cabinet where Netanyahu gets up and says, thoroughly genocidal things. And then Smotrich comes and makes him look moderate.
It's like, hold my beer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, we will wipe out the seed of Amalek, and we still have a long way to go. This is a person in the upper echelon of the government who last week announced in a speech that there had been an internal decision to attack the civilians in the government.
Right.
And not that they hadn't been attacking civilians already. Right. But there is now a conscious operation to
announced
target
government policy.
Ministers of finance, sanitation, like humanitarian aid organizations that are connected to the government there. Doctors, these are the kinds of people he's talking about.
Yeah, this would be the equivalent of, intentionally targeting Israeli embassy workers, which everyone understands that to be a horror and a crime. And they announce it as official government policy here. Yeah. And I do think part of what has turned in terms of world leaders and political commentators recognizing how this is going to look when in the history books is they've been making comments like this from the beginning. For a while, I think they just were able to ignore it because Bibi was doing his dance of, he'd give an English speech and he'd say the things, English language speech, and he'd say the things.
Most moral army in the world, which they don't even say anymore.
They don't even say things like that anymore. And, and there was there were mass propaganda campaigns to justify things like attacks on hospitals. Remember the multimedia presentation, here's the Hamas lair, and this is why, we hate to do it, but they leave us no choice, et cetera. They dropped all of that pretense. And when you couple that with, it's just indefensible to starve 2 million people for over 2 months. There is no world in which that is defensible in any way. And so even the people in the West who most want to cover for them and defend them, at a certain point, if you're engaging with anything that's happening, you have to acknowledge these are overt, intentional, government-directed war crimes. That was the other thing we saw in the beginning is, some documented atrocity would occur. And the people who wanted to cover for Israel, oh, well, that's just a rogue IDF soldier. That's not what the government wants, et cetera. And, why don't they just take away their phones? Why are they posting these things? It's like they're posting them because this is being celebrated by their government and by much of the Israeli public. They're proud of this and they're celebrated for it. That's why they're posting it. It's not some isolated incident. This is core to the mission of what they're doing in Gaza. And now that's just become they've dropped the pretense and it's just thoroughly undeniable.
Yeah, yet the world still has the same kind of set of moral values where they're like, no, we're not okay with this. And I think the West in particular, they hide a lot of their exploitation and human rights abuses under the gloss of language about human rights and democracy.
Yeah.
So that rhetoric is very important for the West.
Right.
Because without that, all they have is people who are getting exploited and suffering.
Right.
And then if you're going to do that, then you might as well have a strong man who's going to go after the bad guys.
Yeah, I mean.
So they need this sheen of morality.
Kyle said this to me yesterday. There's this part of Game of Thrones. You watch Game of Thrones? Where Littlefinger says, knowledge is power. And Cersei says, no, power is power.
Right.
And, as much as I do think it would be difficult for them if Western journalists were allowed in and people were able. I saw still in maybe Haaretz some article that was like, oh, the Israeli public just really doesn't understand what's going on in Gaza. It's like, who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? You have the internet. You have access to all the same stuff that we have access. You want to go and read a drop site report. You can do that. You can see what they're posting on their own Instagram feeds and celebrating. So, that's what has been so hard to grapple with is it's not that people don't know. It's not that the plans haven't been announced. This has been live. We all see it. We see the child being burnt alive. We see the attacks on hospitals. We have these doctors come out and give this horrifying testimony. We know what is happening. And the knowledge of what is going on has not even been close to enough to stop the atrocities. And, that's where I feel like so much is at stake with what happens here, because if it's just allowed, if the genocide and the ethnic cleansing is allowed to be completed, and there isn't true, post-World War II level consequences for the criminals who perpetrated this, the world is, once this is on the table, this is on the table. Then it is just power is power, and that's it. And you can do, if you have the guns and you have the bombs and you have the nukes and the tanks and the money, then you can do to anyone anything that you want to do and no one's going to stop you.
Right, and I think that there are people, particularly in European capitals, who liberal Democrats call them, who don't want that because they feel like they would lose in that contest to right-wing authoritarians.
Yeah, well, Europe would lose in that context in general. I mean, Europe is pretty weak at this point.
Yeah, they need values and morals to be upheld.
International norms to be upheld. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.